Despite the fact that most people are familiar with Ben Franklin's famous adage, "In this world, nothing is certain except death and taxes," it turns out that the Bible clearly records some people as never having passed away. Many Christians will quickly mention Jesus, but one of the fundamental tenets of Christianity is that Jesus actually died before being raised from the dead, as stated in the Gospels. So who are the three men in the Bible who never tasted death? 1. Enoch, the man whom God removed. Despite how magnificent the patriarchs of the faith were, they all died. Abraham, for instance, passed away and was buried. This is what Genesis 25:7-15 says regarding Abraham's passing. Abraham lived for a total of 137 years. Abraham eventually gave his last breath, passed away at a ripe old age, and was gathered to his people. In the field of Ephron, son of Zohar, the Hittite, which Abraham had purchased from the Hittites, near Mamre, his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him. Abraham and Sarah were interred there. Isaac, Abraham's favored son, lived 180 years longer than his father, yet also perished. Genesis 35:28. The Apostle Paul, who is said to have been executed under Emperor Nero, did as well, as did Jacob, Noah, Gideon, Isaiah, and even Noah. Enoch, though, was an exception. Neither a natural death nor a murderous act was committed against him. The Bible claims that God removed him. Therefore, he neither experienced nor was buried in death. You might find it interesting to learn that the Bible contains other individuals with the names Enoch and Hanok. One was a Cain's son, General 4:17, and the other was a Jared's son, General 5:18. According to Genesis 25:4 and 46:9, the other were Midian and Reuben's respective sons. However, the Enoch we are referring to here is the one who walked obediently with God and did not pass away until he was carried up to heaven. Moses described it as follows in the book of Genesis. Enoch had children and spent 300 years with God after having Methuselah. Consequently, Enoch lived for 350 years in total, and Enoch was there, but he was not because God had taken him. NKJV Genesis 5:22-35. Did you see that? It reads, "And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him." Let us break down this. Enoch walked alongside God. This proves that during his entire earthly life, Enoch was obedient to God, and he wasn't. Therefore, Enoch never passed away and was never buried. He was never discovered, because God snatched him. Thus, Enoch was never killed or interred like other men of his period, because God himself took Enoch directly out of the ground. Further explanation is provided by the author of Hebrews, who writes, "By faith, Enoch was taken from this life, so that he did not experience death. He could not be discovered, since God had taken him away. He was praised as someone who pleased God before he was taken." 11:5 in Hebrews. How much is known about Enoch? The life of the obedient man known as Enoch is summarized in Genesis chapter 5:21-25. The following facts concerning him will become clear to you after reading the story. The father of Enoch was Jared. As a result, he is a grandchild of Mahalalel, Jared's father. When Enoch was born, his father Jared was already 132 years old. Enoch was Methuselah's father, and Methuselah was the one who ultimately lived the longest life ever recorded in human history, 969 years. Enoch was 65 years old when Methuselah was born. We were not given the names of Enoch's other sons and daughters besides Methuselah. Enoch lived on earth for a total of 365 years before God took him away. Enoch was not physically killed, and he was not buried either. He was just charioted off the face of the planet by God. A chariot was used to transport Enoch. Enoch's story teaches the importance of walking closely with God, living a righteous life, and maintaining a strong personal relationship with him. Enoch's example emphasizes the significance of faithfulness, obedience, and intimacy with God as a path to spiritual closeness and eternal life. 2. Elijah, the man raptured with heavenly chariots. Elijah was another man who passed away spiritually. When his mission on earth was complete, God sent a chariot of fire to carry him in a whirlwind to heaven. It seems likely that Enoch's exit from the world was a quiet one. God merely took him away. No rituals were necessary. However, Elijah's situation was unique. He was transported to safety in the most lavish manner by the hand of God. The entire narrative is contained in 2 Kings chapter 2. Then, as they continued to converse, a chariot of fire and fire horses suddenly emerged, tearing them apart. Elijah then flew into heaven in a whirlwind. 2 Kings 2:11. Being present as Elijah was transported to heaven, Elisha must have thought it was a breathtaking sight. How much is known about Elijah? In the Old Testament of the Bible, Elijah was a prominent prophet. Here are a few details that have been established about him. God's prophet Elijah was a Tishbite, native who lived in Gilead. In the conflict between him and the false prophets of Baal, Elijah called down fire. According to 1 Kings 17:1, Elijah was the prophet who foretold the 3.5-year drought that would strike the region. The rains came back to the ground after Elijah prayed once more. During a protracted famine, God sent a raven to feed Elijah. In Zarephath, a widow gave food to Elijah, and Elijah then magically quadrupled her provisions. The story of Elijah emphasizes God's power and authority, as well as the importance of unwavering faith and obedience to God's call. It teaches Christians to trust in God's provision and guidance, even in challenging circumstances, and to fulfill their roles as His messengers faithfully. 3. Melchizedek, the only man in history without a biological lineage. Melchizedek, the phantasmal priest-king of Salem, is the third biblical person claimed to have lived forever. When Abram converses with the king of Sodom in Genesis 14:18, Melchizedek appears to come, bless Abram, and then, after exchanging a tithe, appears to vanish. In verse 21, Abram resumes his talk with the king of Sodom. This brief interaction led the author of Hebrews 7:3 to describe Melchizedek as without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, which helped to spread the myth that Melchizedek never passed away. Do not take our word for it. Read 1 Chronicles to see how important genealogies were to the Jews. Melchizedek, however, does not. Melchizedek, son of so-and-so, does not exist. No mother is mentioned. No son is mentioned. Basically nothing. The author of Hebrews emphasizes this point quite a bit. He contrasts Melchizedek, who has no recorded birth, death, or anything else, with Aaron's lineage-based priesthood. He 7:3-8. How much is known about Melchizedek? The mystery of Melchizedek takes several different turns at this point and becomes incredibly interesting. Was he simply a good person? A theophany, an appearance of Jesus before his physical birth? A guardian angel appointed to oversee Salem? Of course, the author's main argument is not that. The purpose of Hebrews is to demonstrate to the Hebrew Christians who have converted the superior priesthood of Jesus. Although Melchizedek is only referenced a few times in the Bible, his significance cannot be overstated. According to Genesis 14:18, Melchizedek was the king of Salem and a priest of the Most High. Canaanite territory contained the city-state of Salem. Salem is Arabic for full, complete, safe, whole, peaceful, one, as opposed to Selah, which I believe means air harp solo. Melchizedek was the monarch of peace, which reminds us of another Prince of Peace we are familiar with. The author of Hebrews draws our attention to this while comparing Melchizedek to Jesus. He 7:2. Salem, the safe and peaceful elements of the city's name, appear to be accurately described. This is also intriguing because Jerusalem, the location of Solomon's temple that would stand, was once known as the ancient town of Salem. It makes sense that the author of Hebrews would want to emphasize the relationship between Jesus and Melchizedek. David, the king of Jerusalem, is the father of Jesus, and like Melchizedek, Jesus is the high priest of the new covenant. After Abraham freed his nephew Lot from slavery, Melchizedek blessed him. Melchizedek was described as being without father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life. Hebrews 7:3. In the book of Hebrews, this is taken to imply that he was not descended from humans and was hence not subject to death. We can indeed learn several truths from the life of this enigmatic patriarch. First, God and his ways will always exceed our understanding. The mystery of Melchizedek reminds us that there is so much that we cannot understand, at least not this side of heaven. Second, Jesus Christ, as foreshadowed in Psalm 110, sums up in himself the whole of the Old Testament. In particular, he is both the divinely anointed king and an eternal priest in the order of Melchizedek. Thus, the more we study the Old Testament, the more we will understand who Jesus really is and what he accomplished. We must increase our faith to live like these men in preparation to be caught up in the air like Enoch. For just like Hebrews says, without faith, it will be difficult to please the Father.